1945, explorers found the broken remains of a ship once sold as practically invincible. The images confirmed it. It was Titanic, missing since the early hours of April 15, 1912. Today, you will walk these corridors knowing what almost no one on board knew back then. Before you step through the front doors of Titanic, hit subscribe and follow every step of this guided tour. You walk through Titanic's first class of April 14, 1912. The ship is cruising at about 22 knots on a calm sea, its 4 funnels lined up against the dark horizon. Here, everything was designed to project safety, luxury, and control. Thick carpet under your feet, light wood paneling on the walls, electric lights organizing every corridor. Records show that at this hour, almost no one on board imagines any serious danger. Every detail around you is a last chance to see Titanic intact. In second class, the setting is less luxurious, but still far above average for 1912. Here travel middle-class families, teachers, shopkeepers, and professionals on the move. The cabins are smaller but well-equipped with beds, wash basins, and just enough space for luggage. The lounges offer books, games, and quiet reading areas. Everything suggests routine, order, and the feeling that this trip is completely under control. In third class, Titanic carries mostly immigrants headed for America. Records show Irish, Scandinavian, Italian, and other European groups sharing the space. The dormitories are communal, with metal bunks and very little room for baggage. For many here, this is not a luxury trip. It is a one-way ticket to a new life. You walk these narrow corridors and see simple routines unfolding on a ship that still feels totally safe. In Titanic's kitchens, everything runs like a grand hotel on land. Company records list tons of meat, vegetables, fruit, bread, and drinks loaded for this single voyage. Separate teams handle roasts, soups, desserts, and tea service, all following strict schedules. This structure mainly serves first and second class, but in practice it sustains the whole ship. As you move through these service areas, you see the constant work that keeps the luxury of the lounges alive. The ship sails on a calm sea, its 4 funnels visible in the dark of the North Atlantic. In the wireless room, operators receive ice warnings sent by other ships in the area. Some messages are logged and passed on to the officers. Others get mixed in with the flood of private messages from passengers. You can tell the information about ice is there, it just has not really changed the pace of the voyage yet. Beneath the elegant lounges, Titanic depends on dozens of firemen and engineers to hold her speed at around 22 knots. In the boiler rooms, the heat is intense and the work never stops, with coal feeding the furnaces that drive the turbines and the great reciprocating engines. Technical reports from the time describe a robust system designed for long crossings. You see the physical effort that sustains the comfort people feel on the decks above. In first-class lounges, the orchestra plays light pieces while passengers stroll between tables, games, and conversations. The sea stays calm, with no heavy waves breaking against the hull. For anyone here, the voyage still matches the comfort promised in the company brochures. On the technical side, the ice warnings have already been received. In the daily life of the lounges, though, nothing suggests any immediate threat. High above, the lookouts watch an unusual Atlantic. The sea is so calm there is almost no foam to outline obstacles. The wireless set keeps receiving ice warnings from other ships in the region. Some of these messages are logged and passed to the bridge. Others arrive while the operators are buried under a heavy load of passenger traffic. The information exists, but the danger still feels far away. Shortly before midnight, the lookouts finally spot something ahead of Titanic. Survivor accounts describe a strange glow on the horizon that reveals an iceberg very close to the ship's path. The lookout bell rings and the bridge gets the warning by phone. The order is clear: turn the ship and reduce speed. Even so, the distance is already short. As the hull scrapes along the ice, the impact is felt unevenly, gentle in the lounges, much stronger in the lower parts of the ship. The crew in the lower sections realizes something has changed. In the boiler rooms, water starts to force its way in through openings in the hull, then in a steady flow. The math is brutal. With several compartments flooded, Titanic cannot stay afloat. From this point on, every minute counts. If you want to follow, step by step, what happens in each part of the ship until the end, stay with us through this video and subscribe so you do not miss the next chapters of this investigation. In first class, the effects of the impact still seem minor. Stewards start knocking on cabin doors, asking everyone to put on life jackets and head up to the boat deck. The official explanation is simple: a precaution. Many dress slowly. Some even treat the call as a temporary annoyance. The contrast becomes clear between the technical seriousness of the damage and the still confident behavior of part of first class. In second class, the change comes more slowly. Some passengers notice the ship has lost a part of the vibration from the engines and is tilted slightly toward the bow. Many wonder if this is only a drill or a small, temporary issue. Corridors and stairways begin to fill. It is obvious that not everyone knows exactly where they should go. In third class, the shift is slower and more confusing. Many passengers do not receive clear instructions at the beginning. Some only notice the increasing tilt of the ship and water creeping into lower spaces. Later reports show entire groups taking a long time to find a way out. Down here, time is already working against them. Jutbai. In Titanic's wireless room, the operators keep working even after the impact. At a certain point, the ship starts sending distress calls to every vessel in range. First, they use the old CQD call, then they add SOS, the newer standard. The messages include an approximate position and one clear line. Titanic is in danger. Other ships answer, but distance and travel time become a whole new challenge. In the lower compartments, water is no longer just a leak. It fills entire corridors. The bow sinks deeper, and the ship's list and trim become noticeable even on higher decks. Loose objects slide. Doors get harder to close. Moving against the tilt takes more effort. Titanic still looks organized, but she is no longer stable. On the boat deck, things look organized at first glance, but normality is gone. First and second class passengers stand side by side, almost all wearing life jackets, waiting for orders. The lifeboats start loading slowly, with women and children given priority. Titanic is still brightly lit. Even so, each passing minute makes the choice to remain on board more dangerous. As the tilt increases, Titanic's boats begin to leave the ship with passengers on board. The rule of women and children first is applied differently on each side of the ship. Some men remain standing on deck, watching their families being lowered toward the ocean. Each lifeboat carries more than people. It carries decisions that can never be reversed. Lounges that were full now appear almost deserted, with chairs out of place, plates left behind, and lights still shining over empty tables. On the lower decks, water swallows entire passageways and forces the crew to retreat, compartment by compartment. The contrast is striking. From the outside, the ship still looks like a great, fully lit ocean liner. Inside, many spaces are now only used as quick shortcuts or have been completely abandoned. Engineers and electricians fight to keep the power on for as long as possible. Without it, there is no internal lighting and no radio. Witnesses recall the lights flickering, then coming back, holding on until just a few minutes before the final plunge. As you follow these sections, you can almost feel the effort to keep the ship alive while the structure is already giving way to the flood. Water now fills several forward compartments, while the stern remains high out of the water. This creates a massive difference in weight and tension across the central sections of the ship. Survivor accounts and later studies point to internal fractures, warped passageways, and constant metallic groans. The ship is still in one piece, but she behaves like a structure pushed to the very edge of its physical limits. In the final minutes, Titanic reaches an extreme angle. The central structure is forced to bear a load that goes far beyond the original design. Modern research suggests the hull broke between the central decks, near the third and fourth funnels. The lights go out almost at the same moment the breakup occurs. From there, bow and stern sink separately, leaving only wreckage, lifeboats, and people in the freezing water on the surface. The water temperature hovers around freezing, cutting the average survival time down to just a few minutes. Witnesses describe an initial wave of desperate cries, followed by a sudden silence as the extreme cold takes over the human body. Of the more than 2,200 people on board, just over 700 will be rescued alive. Now, the lifeboats are the only solid structures in sight. In the early morning hours, the ship Carpathia answers the distress calls and reaches the area where Titanic went down. Lifeboats filled with survivors slowly approach the new ship, which lowers nets, side ladders, and blankets. Crew members take names, offer hot drinks, and reorganize the spaces on board to fit everyone. As you watch this process, you see the contrast between the disciplined rescue effort and the shock still visible on the faces of those who left Titanic behind. As Carpathia heads toward New York, the first reports of Titanic's sinking begin to spread over the radio. Companies, newspapers, and government offices try to confirm how many survived and what happened to a ship sold as modern and safe. From this moment on, Titanic is no longer just an ocean liner. She becomes a case study in technology and human decision-making that will be re-examined for generations. Within weeks of the disaster, Titanic is already at the center of court hearings, newspaper stories, and religious services in several countries. Passenger lists are read aloud. Families fight to confirm who survived. New maritime safety rules begin to take shape. At the same time, on the floor of the North Atlantic, the hull lies in silence, intact for its time, starting its transformation into one of the most studied shipwrecks in history. On the bottom of the North Atlantic, Titanic remains as a fragmented, settled structure in an almost lightless world. Future expeditions and studies will turn this site into one of the most documented underwater locations on the planet. Today, every line of deck, every rivet in the hull, and every flooded compartment reminds us that behind the cutting-edge technology of 1912, there were hard physical limits set by the ocean itself.